They say a house becomes a home when love lives inside it. But in mine, love died the day my mother did. And in its place, something darker grew. Something that wore my mother's perfume, her smile, her place beside my father. But it was never her my stepmother. From the moment she arrived, the air in our house changed. The laughter faded. The warmth vanished. And somehow, in the blink of an eye, I went from being the daughter of the house to being its servant. If you've ever been invisible in your own home, if you've ever cried quietly so no one could hear, stay with me till the end. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about remembering who I was before they made me forget. Please like, subscribe, and stay until the end because sometimes the quietest voices hold the loudest truths. My father met her a year after my mother passed away. I was 16, too young to understand how grief makes people do desperate things. He said she made him laugh again, that she brought light into his life. But to me, she was a shadow that followed us everywhere, smiling, pretending, and slowly taking pieces of him I could never get back. At first, she was gentle, too gentle. She'd sit beside me, braid my hair, tell me how much I looked like my mother. She'd whisper that she only wanted to take care of me, to help me heal. I almost believed her. Until the wedding. That night, I remember standing in front of the mirror, wearing a simple blue dress, while she wore white, as if she were the bride of something far greater than my father. When I looked at her reflection, she smiled, but it wasn't warmth. It was victory. The day after the wedding, she moved into my mother's room, my mother's closet, my mother's life. And just like that, my place in the house began to shrink. It started with small things. My chores got longer. My meals got smaller. My room, the one my mother painted with soft yellow walls, was moved to the attic because, as she said, the sunlight downstairs is too much for you. My father never questioned it. He was too busy being in love, too lost in her laughter to notice the silence growing in me. I became the invisible girl who cleaned their plates, folded their sheets, polished her shoes. She'd leave lipstick stains on every glass, and I'd wipe them away like a ritual, pretending I couldn't see her mark on everything, even him. But I saw it all. She'd whisper things in his ear when she thought I wasn't listening. Things about me being ungrateful, lazy, broken. She painted me as a burden he didn't know how to carry. And the more she spoke, the more distance I felt in my father's eyes. Until one morning, he looked at me like I was a stranger in his home. He said, "You need to learn responsibility. Emma, you can't live like this forever." And I wanted to ask, like what? Like a daughter. But I didn't. I just nodded, because arguing never changed his mind. That was the day I stopped calling him Dad. Every morning after that, I woke before dawn. I cleaned, cooked, and kept silent. The house became my cage, and she, my warden. She loved it, I think. The power, the control, the way she could make me flinch with a single word. And yet, she underestimated silence, because silence isn't weakness, it's storage. And I was storing everything, every insult, every tear, every bruise left by her words. Years passed like that, one long, colorless blur, until the night my father's heart gave out. He died quietly in his sleep. I found him the next morning, pale, peaceful, and gone. She didn't cry, not once. She wore black, but her smile peeked through like sunlight under a storm cloud. I knew why. With him gone, she had it all. The house, the money, the inheritance that was once supposed to be mine. She didn't even let me stay for the funeral arrangements. She said, "You've been nothing but trouble. Emma, leave. You're not needed here anymore." And just like that, the house I grew up in closed its doors behind me. I stood outside with nothing but a small bag and a heavy heart. I remember looking back, watching the curtains move, and thinking, I'll come back, not as the girl you broke, but as the woman you'll regret underestimating. The city was cruel, but it was honest, more honest than she ever was. I worked anywhere I could, cleaning motels, waiting tables, taking night shifts in laundromats. My hands bled, my feet ached, but for the first time in years, I felt something real. Freedom. And maybe it was freedom that built me. One night, while wiping tables in a diner, a woman asked who designed the flower arrangement by the window. I told her I had. She smiled and said, "You have an eye for beauty. You should come by my studio sometime." That's how it started. A tiny chance, a single act of kindness, something my stepmother never gave me. That woman became my mentor. She taught me design, art, how to turn pain into creation. Within years, I built a name for myself, Emma Rayner Designs, the girl who turns sorrow into beauty. My work grew, my company expanded, and my name became something she couldn't ignore. And one day, she didn't. A call came. Unknown number. Familiar voice. "Emma, it's your mother." I almost laughed. "You're not my mother," she sighed. "I need help. The house. The bank's taking it." Silence. For years, I dreamt of hearing her beg. Now that it was happening, I felt nothing. Just peace. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I don't help strangers." She started crying, but I hung up. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd already given her too much of me. Months later, I bought that house at auction. I walked through its empty halls, now silent, now mine again. And when I reached my old room, the attic, I smiled. Not because I won, but because I survived. They say revenge is sweet. But the truth? Revenge is quiet. It's the sound of peace after years of pain. It's looking at the ghosts that once haunted you and realizing you're finally free. You know, I used to believe that healing came from forgetting. That if I buried enough memories, if I filled the silence with noise, maybe I'd stop hearing her voice, the one that always told me I wasn't enough. But healing, it doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from remembering without breaking. After I left that house, I wandered through cities with nothing but a suitcase full of old clothes and a heart full of scars. Every night, I'd fall asleep thinking about her, wondering if she ever thought about me. But I think deep down I knew the answer. People like her don't think about the damage they cause. They just move on until life reminds them. At first, survival was all I knew. I worked long shifts at a bakery during the day and cleaned offices at night. My hands were cracked from soap and water. My feet blistered, my back ached. But I never complained, because even in that struggle, I was free. No one yelled at me. No one called me ungrateful. No one made me feel small. And sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself humming the same lullabies my mother used to sing when I was little, something I hadn't done in years. It felt like her spirit was still guiding me, whispering, "Keep going, my girl. You're almost there." One afternoon, I saw a sign for an art class at a small community center. It was cheap, the kind of thing meant for children, but I signed up anyway. I'd always loved painting when I was younger. My stepmother used to say it was a waste of time. Maybe that's why I loved it so much. At first, my paintings were dark, shadows, storms, empty rooms. But with every brush stroke, I began to let go of something. I painted my pain until it started to look like peace. And that's where I met Julia, my teacher. She was older, kind, and gentle in the way people rarely are anymore. One evening, she pulled me aside and said, "Emma, your art speaks louder than words. You should show it to the world." I laughed. Who would care about a servant's story painted on canvas? She smiled softly. Anyone who's ever been hurt. Those words. They changed everything. Julia helped me get a small spot in a local gallery. I remember standing there on opening night, nervous, wearing a secondhand dress that smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. People stopped in front of my paintings, staring, asking questions. And for the first time, they weren't looking through me, they were seeing me. That night, a journalist came up to me. He said, "Your work feels deeply personal. Who's the woman in the corner of all your paintings?" I smiled faintly. A ghost I used to live with. My story spread. One article turned into 2, then 10. People connected with the pain, the silence, the rise from ashes. Within a few years, I had my own studio, a place that smelled of paint, wood, and freedom. I built something from nothing. Every piece I sold felt like reclaiming a part of myself that she tried to erase. My name, Emma Rayner, began to mean something to people who had never known my past, but somehow felt it through my art. Then one morning, an invitation arrived in the mail. A charity gala. The host, Evelyn Rayner, my stepmother. I froze. I hadn't heard that name in years. The irony hit me. She had kept my father's last name as her own. Maybe it was her way of holding on to what she stole. I didn't plan to go. I had no interest in seeing her again. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. 2 days later, I saw a photo in the newspaper. Her, smiling beside a real estate agent. The caption read, "Rayner Estate on sale due to financial difficulties." For years, she'd built her world on someone else's foundation. My father's money, my mother's home, my silence. And now, it was all crumbling. I wish I could say I felt happy. I didn't. I felt empty because revenge doesn't always bring joy. Sometimes it just reminds you how much you lost before you found yourself. Still, something in me wanted closure. Not revenge, just an ending. So I went to the gala. I wore a black dress, simple but elegant. The kind of dress my stepmother would have hated because it didn't scream for attention. It whispered power. When I walked in, the room went quiet. There she was, standing near the bar, wearing pearls that once belonged to my mother. Her face froze when she saw me. For a second, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Emma," she whispered. I smiled. "You remember me?" She blinked, trying to recover her poise. "Of course, you've grown." "Yes," I said softly. "Freedom does that to a person." We talked for a while. Well, she tried. I mostly listened. Her voice trembled when she mentioned the house. "It's all falling apart, Emma. The debts, the taxes. I don't know what to do." It was strange. The woman who once made me scrub floors until my knees bled now stood before me, begging for sympathy. For a moment, I thought about helping her. I really did. But then I remembered the girl crying in the attic, alone, hungry, unwanted. So I smiled, reached into my purse, and pulled out a card. "Here," I said. "This is my assistant's number. Tell her to schedule a meeting. I might be interested in buying the property." Her eyes widened. "Buying?" I nodded. Yes, after all, it was my father's house. And then I left, calm, quiet, untouched. That night, as I sat in my car, I looked at the city lights and thought about how life circles back. How sometimes the world lets you stand in the very place where you once fell, not to gloat, but to see how far you've climbed. I wasn't done yet. Not with her. Not with that house. Because some stories deserve a proper ending. I used to think revenge meant watching someone suffer the way they made you suffer. But now, as I stood outside the gates of my old house, the one she turned into my prison, I realized revenge was quieter than that. It didn't scream. It didn't destroy. It simply returned home. The wind that night carried the same scent of wild jasmine my mother once grew along the fence. The air was still, heavy with memories. I hadn't seen the place in over a decade, but every brick still remembered me. Every creak of the iron gate whispered my name. I signed the papers that morning. The house was officially mine again. I could have torn it down. I could have left it to rot the way she left me. But instead, I walked through the halls like someone reintroducing herself to her past. The living room, where my father used to read to me. The staircase, where she once yelled at me for missing a spot of dust. The kitchen, where I learned that silence could be a kind of armor. And then the attic. My old room. It was smaller than I remembered. The yellow walls had faded, the floorboards cracked. I ran my fingers along the windowsill and saw my initials carved there. ER, written by a girl who still believed in happy endings. I smiled, not because I'd won, but because she hadn't broken me. As I stood there, I heard a knock at the front door. When I opened it, there she was. Evelyn. Time hadn't been kind to her. Her hair, once shiny and dark, was streaked with gray. Her eyes, those same sharp eyes that used to watch me scrub the floor, now looked lost. Emma, she said softly, I didn't think you'd come back. I tilted my head. You didn't think I'd survive. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked around the house as if seeing it for the first time. It's falling apart, she whispered. I tried to keep it together. I really did. I could have told her how she never kept anything together. How she tore it apart the moment she decided I didn't belong. But instead, I just said, you did what you always do, Evelyn. You pretended. She looked down, her voice cracking. You have no idea what I've been through. I almost laughed. No idea. My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. You made me clean this house until my hands bled. You called me a burden, a mistake, a shadow. And now you stand in front of me, asking for understanding. Her tears came slowly, the kind of tears that weren't for regret, but for realization. The realization that I no longer cared. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was angry, lost. Your father, don't. I cut in. Don't use him to justify what you did to me. He may have loved you, but I never did. You made sure of that. Silence. Just the sound of the wind pushing through the cracked windows. She looked so small then, the woman who once towered over my pain. She wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and said, I suppose this is your revenge, isn't it? Taking back the house, watching me beg. I shook my head. No, Evelyn. My revenge was becoming everything you said I couldn't be. I looked around the house. This is just closure. She stared at me, speechless. I walked past her, out onto the front steps where the sky was turning gold with sunset. You can stay tonight if you need to, I said softly. There's food in the kitchen, but in the morning, you need to go. This house needs peace. Her eyes widened. You're letting me stay. I nodded. Yes, because I refuse to become you. And I meant it. That night, as I sat in the living room, the one that once echoed with her commands and my father's fading laughter, I felt something shift inside me. Forgiveness. Not for her. For me. Because holding anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And I was tired of carrying her shadow. In the morning, I found her sitting by the garden, staring at the wilted jasmine. She looked up as I approached. Your mother planted these, she said. I nodded. She did. She was kind. I didn't respond. She stood slowly, her voice trembling. I wish I could have been that for you. I met her eyes. I wish you could have too. And that was it. No screaming, no apologies, no grand endings. Just two women standing in the garden of their shared ghosts, finally ready to leave. She walked away down the gravel path. I watched until she disappeared beyond the trees. Then I turned back to the house. My house, and for the first time, I felt it breathe again. The walls no longer whispered her name. They whispered mine. Over the next few months, I restored the place piece by piece. I repainted the attic, reopened the windows, and turned it into a small art studio for orphaned girls who had stories like mine. Broken, bruised, but still beautiful. They called it the Yellow Room. And when they asked me why that name, I smiled and said, because once, there was a girl who painted her pain on yellow walls until she found the light again. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the garden, I can almost hear my mother's laughter, soft and warm, mixing with the sound of children's voices. That's when I know the story's over, not because I got revenge, but because I finally got peace.